I never thought my cousin's wedding would change my life forever. For years, I'd been the family's invisible member, the niece who wasn't pretty enough, successful enough, or important enough to be included. My aunt made sure I knew my place in the hierarchy of our prestigious Boston family, and it was always at the bottom. "Emily, you should wear something less attention-grabbing," my Aunt Sarah said when I arrived at the Harrison estate in my simple blue dress. I looked down at my outfit, modest, elegant, nothing flashy, but that was her way of saying I didn't belong in the spotlight. "And maybe pull your hair back. It's a bit wild today." I nodded and retreated to the bathroom to tame my curls, blinking back tears. At 26, I should have been immune to her subtle jabs, but they still cut deep, especially on days when family gathered. Days that reminded me how alone I'd been since my parents died in that terrible car accident 5 years ago. The wedding was extravagant beyond imagination. My cousin Melissa had always been the golden child, beautiful, accomplished, and now marrying into one of the wealthiest families in New England. Her fiancé, James Harrison, came from old money with connections to everyone who mattered in Boston's elite circles. His family owned half the city's real estate and had their name on at least 3 university buildings. As guests gathered for pre-ceremony photos on the sweeping lawn, my aunt approached me with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Emily, dear," she said, her voice honey-sweet but laced with command, "why don't you help the staff arrange the gift table? The family photos are about to start." I nodded, used to being sidelined. As I turned to walk away, she grabbed my arm with manicured fingers that dug slightly into my skin and whispered, "Stay out of the photos. This is Melissa's day, and the Harrisons are particular about appearances. We wouldn't want anything to detract from the perfect family image." Her words stung, but I wasn't surprised. I'd spent my life being pushed into the background by my mother's sister, especially after becoming her unwanted ward. While Melissa had been given every advantage, private schools, European vacations, a trust fund that ensured she'd never need to work, I had struggled through community college, working 2 jobs to finish my nursing degree. I busied myself helping the event staff, watching from a distance as my relatives posed and smiled for the photographer. Aunts, uncles, cousins I rarely saw except at occasions like this, all dressed impeccably, all belonging in a way I never had. The photographer arranged everyone on the grand staircase of the Harrison estate, my aunt and uncle front and center beside the bride, with extended family surrounding them like a perfect portrait of American success. Just as they were about to start, James, the groom, looked around with a slight frown creasing his handsome face. He whispered something to Melissa, then scanned the crowd until his eyes found me tucked away near the gift table, trying to make myself invisible as I'd been trained to do. "Wait!" he called out, his authoritative voice silencing the chatter instantly. "We're missing someone important." My aunt's perfect smile faltered as James strode directly toward me, extending his hand. I noticed his father, the imposing Robert Harrison, watching the scene with an unreadable expression. "Emily, right?" James said warmly. "Please join us for the family photos." I froze, glancing at my aunt's horrified expression. "Oh, I was just helping with—" "Nonsense," James insisted, taking my hand firmly in his. "Your family. You belong up there with everyone else." As he led me toward the staircase, whispers rippled through the guests. My aunt's face had turned an alarming shade of red beneath her carefully applied makeup. "James, dear," she intervened smoothly, stepping forward, "Emily doesn't need to be in these. She's actually quite camera shy, always has been since she was a little girl." But James wasn't having it. He smiled at me warmly and said, "Well, we can't have incomplete family photos, can we? Besides, I specifically requested all family members be included." There was something in his tone, a hardness beneath the charm, that made my aunt step back. What happened next left everyone speechless. Instead of placing me at the back or edge of the group, James guided me right beside him, on the opposite side from Melissa. I stood there between the groom and his father, while my cousin's smile became increasingly brittle. "Perfect," James said to the photographer. "Now we're ready." My aunt looked like she might faint. Melissa's eyes darted between her soon-to-be husband and me with growing confusion. And I stood there, completely bewildered about why the groom of all people was insisting on my inclusion, and in such a prominent position. The photographer hesitated, clearly sensing the tension, but James nodded firmly. "Go ahead. I want Emily featured prominently in these photos." As cameras flashed, I felt dozens of eyes burning into me. Why was James, a man I'd barely exchanged 10 words with during family gatherings, suddenly treating me like an honored guest? More puzzling still was how his father, Robert Harrison, placed a hand on my shoulder during several shots, almost protectively. After several uncomfortable minutes, the formal photos concluded. My aunt immediately pulled me aside behind a large floral arrangement, her nails digging into my arm with enough force to leave marks. "What did you say to him?" she hissed, her face contorted with barely controlled rage. "How dare you try to insert yourself?" "I didn't say anything," I protested, trying to free my arm. "He came to find me." "Listen carefully," she said, her voice low and threatening. "Whatever game you're playing, stop it now. The Harrisons are not people you want to cross, and neither am I. Remember who put a roof over your head when no one else would. Remember who pays for your education." "You mean my parents' life insurance money pays for my education?" I replied, finding unexpected courage. "Money that you control as my guardian, even though I'm well past 21. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "You ungrateful little—" Before she could finish, the wedding planner appeared, announcing it was time for the ceremony. My aunt gave me one last warning look before rejoining my uncle, her pleasant facade sliding seamlessly back into place. During the ceremony, beneath a canopy of white roses, I sat in the back row, trying to make sense of what had happened. James kept glancing in my direction during the vows, something that didn't go unnoticed by other guests, or by Melissa, whose smile became increasingly forced as she repeated her promises to love and cherish. At the reception, I planned to keep a low profile, choosing a table far from the main action where distant relatives I barely knew were seated. But as dinner was about to be served, a staff member in immaculate uniform approached me. "Miss Emily, Mr. Harrison has requested you sit at the family table." Heads turned as I was escorted to the head table, where an empty seat waited between James's father and brother. My aunt looked appalled, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. "There must be some mistake," she said quickly, attempting to laugh it off. "Emily always prefers to sit away from crowds. Anxiety issues, you understand?" "No mistake," James's father replied, standing to pull out my chair. His deep voice carried authority that even my aunt couldn't challenge. James was quite specific about the seating arrangements. "Emily sits with family." Throughout dinner, the Harrison men treated me with surprising warmth, asking about my nursing studies and seeming genuinely interested in my answers. James's father, Robert Harrison, a distinguished man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes, kept studying my face with an odd expression. "You have remarkable eyes," he commented during the main course. "They remind me of someone I knew long ago." When the dancing began, I tried to slip away, planning to call a rideshare and escape the increasingly bizarre situation. But James intercepted me at the edge of the dance floor, elegantly stepping into my path. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. The wedding band had just started playing a slow, romantic melody. I hesitated, seeing Melissa watching us from her table with growing alarm. "I don't think that's appropriate. You should be dancing with your bride." "Just one dance," he insisted, his voice dropping lower. There's something important I need to tell you. Something about your parents." My heart nearly stopped at his words. Against my better judgment, I accepted his hand. As we moved across the polished floor, every eye in the room followed us, and the whispers grew louder. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked. "You're causing a scene on your wedding day? People are talking?" James's expression turned serious, the charming smile disappearing entirely. "Because I know who you are, Emily, and more importantly, I know what my family did to yours." My heart raced. "What are you talking about?" "Your parents' accident wasn't an accident," he said quietly, maintaining a pleasant expression for onlookers while delivering words that shattered my world. "Robert Harrison, my father, was responsible. Your parents were going to expose corrupt business practices that would have destroyed the Harrison empire." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "That's impossible. They died in a car crash on the coastal highway. The brakes failed. A crash that was orchestrated," he said grimly. "I only discovered the truth 3 months ago, going through old company files while preparing to take over as CEO. By then, the wedding plans were too far along to stop without raising suspicions." "Why would you still marry into my family then?" I whispered, struggling to process his words. "If you know all this." "Because I needed access to both families to make things right," he replied, guiding me through a turn. "Your aunt has known the truth all along. She's been paid handsomely to keep you marginalized and unaware of your inheritance." "Inheritance?" The word felt foreign on my tongue. "Your father wasn't just some small-time investor like your aunt told you. He was Robert Harrison's business partner before they had a falling out. His share of the company was worth millions, money that should have gone to you after they died. Instead, your aunt became your guardian and signed it all away. That's why she's kept you dependent on her all these years." The elegant ballroom seemed to spin around me, faces blurring. "Why are you telling me this now? At your wedding?" "Because tonight is just the beginning," James said, his grip on my hand tightening slightly. "In exactly 3 minutes, federal agents will arrive with warrants for both our fathers and your uncle. The evidence I've been gathering for months will ensure they pay for what they did." As if on cue, commotion erupted at the grand entrance. Men in dark suits entered, moving purposefully toward Robert Harrison and my uncle. Melissa's father, always a nervous man, knocked over his champagne glass. "I'm sorry to ruin what was supposed to be a perfect wedding day," James said, genuine regret in his eyes, "but not sorry to finally bring justice for your parents." As chaos unfolded around us, James placed a small USB drive in my hand, closing my fingers around it. "Everything you need to claim what's rightfully yours is here. A new lawyer will contact you tomorrow. I've made sure you'll be taken care of." My aunt's screams echoed through the hall as her husband was handcuffed alongside Robert Harrison. She lunged toward me, her face contorted with rage, makeup streaking down her cheeks. "You ungrateful little witch, after everything we did for you." But before she could reach me, Melissa stepped between us. To my shock, my cousin's eyes were filled with tears, her perfect wedding dress now a stark contrast to the scene unfolding. "I'm sorry, Emily," she whispered. "I never knew the whole truth, but I suspected something was wrong all these years. I was too cowardly to stand up to them." As the Harrisons and my uncle were led away in handcuffs, James turned to me one last time. "Stay strong. Justice is finally coming, even if it took destroying my own family to get it." And that's how I went from being the invisible niece to the central figure in the biggest scandal Boston had seen in decades. All because a groom decided that truth was more important than a perfect wedding day. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room I didn't remember booking. My head pounded as fragments of the previous night crashed over me. The federal agents, my aunt screaming, James's revelation about my parents' deaths. For a moment, I wondered if it had all been a terrible dream. Then I saw the USB drive on the nightstand and knew it was real. My phone had been buzzing non-stop since dawn, missed calls from relatives, text messages ranging from concerned to accusatory, and dozens of notifications from social media. Apparently, Harrison Heir orchestrates FBI raid at own wedding was trending locally. At precisely 9 a.m., my phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Ms. Emily Winters, this is Diana Chen from Blackwell Legal. James Harrison arranged for our firm to represent you. I'm outside your hotel room, whenever you're ready to begin." I opened the door to find a sharp-looking woman in her 40s holding a leather portfolio. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're at the center of what's about to become the biggest financial fraud case in Massachusetts history," she said once we were seated. "The Harrison Corporation, your uncle's investment firm, and 3 other companies are implicated in a scheme that spanned nearly 6 years, since shortly before your parents' deaths." I clutched the USB drive. "James said my father was Robert Harrison's business partner." "More than that," Diana replied, opening her laptop. "Your father, Michael Winters, was the financial genius behind the Harrison fortune. When he discovered irregularities in the company books, money being funneled to offshore accounts, tax evasion, bribes to government officials, he threatened to go public. 3 weeks later, his car went off that cliff." My throat tightened. And my mother. Collateral damage, I'm afraid, though she knew enough to be dangerous as well. I'd spent 5 years believing their deaths were a tragic accident, a rainy night, a sharp curve, faulty brakes. Now, I was being told it was murder. "The FBI has been building this case for years," Diana continued, "but they lacked key evidence until James came forward 3 months ago. He'd found encrypted files your father had hidden before his death, files that connected everything." "But why would James betray his own family?" I asked, still struggling to understand his motives. Diana's expression softened slightly. "James's mother died when he was young. Robert Harrison remarried quickly, to a woman who made James's life miserable. Sound familiar?" I thought of my aunt, how quickly she'd taken control of my life while treating me like an unwanted burden. "When James discovered what his father had done to your family, something snapped," Diana explained. "He's been working with federal prosecutors ever since, gathering evidence while pretending everything was normal. The wedding provided the perfect opportunity to get everyone in one place. And Melissa, my cousin, unaware of the specific plan for yesterday, but she's known about the investigation for weeks. James gave her a choice, stand with him for justice or stand with her parents. Apparently she chose justice, though I imagine that marriage is effectively over." I remembered Melissa stepping between me and my aunt, her whispered apology. Perhaps there was more to my perfect cousin than I'd realized. Diana pulled out several documents. "Now, regarding your inheritance, your father's ownership stake in Harrison Corporation was transferred to your aunt and uncle as your guardians after his death. They were supposed to hold it in trust until you turned 25. Instead, they sold the shares back to Robert Harrison for a fraction of their worth and pocketed the money." My hands trembled as I looked at the numbers. "This says my father's stake was worth approximately $37 million at the time of his death. Today, it would be closer to $50 million. The room seemed to spin. I'd been working double shifts at a coffee shop to afford textbooks, while my aunt and uncle had stolen millions from me. "With the evidence James provided, we can file to recover those assets, plus damages," Diana continued. "The criminal case against the Harrisons and your relatives will take time, but the civil case to restore your inheritance can move forward immediately." I thought about all the years of struggling, of being made to feel like a charity case in my own family, when all along. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice stronger than I expected. "First, we need to go through everything on that drive. Then I'd suggest moving to a more secure location. Once word gets out about your role in this, the press will be relentless." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Liberty Hotel, room 7018. We need to talk. James." Diana frowned when I showed her. "I wouldn't recommend meeting him alone. His actions may seem heroic, but his motives could be complicated. I need to hear from him directly," I insisted. "After everything that's happened, I deserve that much." An hour later, I stood outside room 718, heart pounding. When I knocked, it wasn't James who answered, but Melissa, still in yesterday's makeup, eyes red-rimmed from crying. "She's here," she called over her shoulder, then gave me a weary look. "I guess we have a lot to talk about, cousin." James appeared behind her, his wedding suit replaced by jeans and a simple button-down. He looked exhausted, but managed a small smile. "Thank you for coming," he said, stepping aside to let me enter. "I know you must have 1,000 questions." The suite was littered with evidence of an all-night strategy session, laptops, documents, empty coffee cups. A news channel played silently on the TV, showing footage of Robert Harrison being escorted into a federal building. "Why am I here?" I asked, remaining standing while they sat on opposite ends of the sofa. "Your lawyer is already handling my case." "Because there's more you need to know," James replied. "Things I couldn't tell you last night." Melissa spoke up, her voice hoarse. "I wanted to meet you properly, without my mother poisoning everything." She twisted her wedding ring absently. "I've spent years watching how they treated you, knowing something wasn't right, but too afraid to question it." "You could have said something," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "All those family dinners where I was seated at the children's table, even in my 20s, all those holidays where I received token gifts while you got everything." "I know," she whispered. "There's no excuse." James cleared his throat. "Emily, I asked you here because what happens in the next 48 hours will determine how this all plays out. Your aunt has already hired Preston Walsh." I frowned. "Who?" "Only the most ruthless defense attorney in Boston," Melissa explained. "If anyone can get my parents out of this, it's him. They'll fight dirty." "They'll claim you're part of a conspiracy," James added. "That you worked with me to frame them out of resentment. That you've been unstable since your parents' death." My stomach clenched. "But the evidence is solid. But cases like this aren't just about evidence. They're about narrative. And your aunt and my father are masters at controlling narratives." Melissa nodded grimly. "My mother has already called every society friend she has, spinning a story about how you manipulated James, how you've always been jealous of our family. That's ridiculous. I barely knew James before yesterday." "Actually," James said quietly, "that's not entirely true." Both Melissa and I turned to him in surprise. "Your father was like a second father to me," he explained. "When I was 10 and my mother died, Michael Winters was the one who made sure I didn't get lost in my grief. He taught me to sail, helped with my science projects. My own father was always too busy." I stared at him, searching my memory. "I don't remember you." "You were just a little kid then, about 5 or 6. But I remember you. When your parents died and your aunt took over, she made sure I never had contact with you again, said it would be too painful for you to see anyone connected to your old life." Another lie. How many had there been? After college, when I joined the family business, I started noticing discrepancies in the company history. Mentions of your father that didn't align with what I'd been told. That's when I began digging. "So this wedding," I glanced at Melissa, "was real at first," she answered, looking down. "James and I had been dating for years. The engagement was genuine. But 3 months ago, everything changed." She looked at him with a mixture of sadness and respect. "He told me what he'd discovered about our families. gave me the choice to stand with truth or with my parents. It couldn't have been an easy decision, I said, surprised to find myself sympathizing with her. It wasn't, she admitted, but once I knew, I couldn't unknow it. I couldn't marry James with that secret between us, but I also couldn't betray him to my parents. So we maintained the appearance of a happy couple while working with the FBI. James reached for a folder on the coffee table. "Emily, there's something else you should see." He handed me a photograph I didn't recognize, a company party from years ago. "This was taken about 8 months before your parents died." And I studied the image, my father in a suit standing proudly beside a younger Robert Harrison, both men beaming, and there, partially visible between them, was my mother, laughing at something. "Turn it over," James said softly. On the back, in my father's handwriting, "The 3 partners celebrate Winters Harrison reaching 100 millimeters valuation. Michael, Robert, and Catherine, the future is bright. May 2016. "Catherine?" I looked up confused. My mother's name was Elizabeth. James and Melissa exchanged glances. "Catherine was my mother," James said quietly. "She died when I was 10, remember? 3 years after that photo was taken." I stared at him, not comprehending. "What are you saying?" "Your father and my father weren't just business partners, Emily. They were best friends for decades. After my mother died, your parents became my second family. Robert Harrison remarried within a year to a social climber who couldn't stand reminders of his first wife, including me." Pieces started falling into place. "Your stepmother, Sarah Harrison, now Sarah Winters, your aunt." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. "My aunt is your stepmother, but that would make us step-cousins, technically," Melissa supplied, "though we never used those terms. When my mother married your uncle after divorcing James's father, the family connections became complicated." I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "So when my parents died, Adi, Sarah made sure she became your guardian," James finished. "Not because she cared about you, but because she needed control of your inheritance, just like she tried to control mine until I was old enough to fight back." "All these years," I whispered, "she's been the connection between our families, the one who kept us apart." "And the one who helped orchestrate your parents' deaths," James said grimly. "We found evidence on the drive that she was the one who suggested tampering with the brakes. She stood to gain the most. Control over you, your inheritance, and increased influence over both the Harrison and Winters families." I thought I'd reached my limit for shock, but this revelation left me breathless. The woman who'd raised me, however coldly, had helped murder my parents. "The FBI will be arresting her separately from the others," James continued. "The charges against her are more severe." "I never knew," Melissa said, tears streaming down her face. "I swear, Emily, I never knew what she'd done. I just thought she was controlling and status-obsessed, not a murderer." My phone buzzed with a news alert. "Breaking. Sarah Winters, socialite connected to Harrison financial scandal, taken into custody on conspiracy to commit murder charges." "It's starting," James said. "Now we need to decide what happens next." I looked between them. The groom who'd sacrificed his perfect day for justice, the bride who'd chosen truth over family loyalty, and thought about the tangled web that had kept us all prisoners for years. "What I want," I said slowly, finding strength I didn't know I had, "is to finish what my father started. Not just justice for my parents, but exposure of everything they were trying to uncover." I held up the USB drive, starting with whatever's on this. James nodded with something like pride. "I was hoping you'd say that." "It won't be easy," Melissa warned. "The Harrison Empire has tentacles everywhere. People will take sides." "Then let them," I replied, thinking of all the years I'd spent invisible, pushed aside, made to feel worthless. I'm done hiding in the shadows. It's time everyone knew the truth about all of us. Dean, as we began planning our next moves, I realized the wedding that was supposed to unite two powerful families had done exactly that, just not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of cementing a dynasty built on corruption, it had created an unlikely alliance dedicated to tearing it down. And for the first time since my parents died, I didn't feel alone anymore.